Socialism, a symptom of America's secular sickness. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Listen to this headline right out of Axios. Minneapolis progressives swoon over Zohran Mamdani's New York City win. Progressives, that's the nice way of sugarcoating socialists, right? That's how Democrats like to mask the fact that they've become little more than card-carrying socialists. And really, socialism has become so embraced by Democrats that they're actually moved farther down the field to outright communism. Just wait a few years. There'll be open socialists in office, like we already have now, and soon enough, there will be open communists in office. All brought to you by the Democrat Party, right? Because that's where they all run on. That's the ticket that they choose to run on. Before I get into more of this, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app. At Real Life Network, that is the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church in California. You can also get Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com, where I would invite you to subscribe to my 3 times a week Bold and Blunt newsletter. Just enter your email address in the newsletter section, where Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley is highlit, and you will have delivered right to your email box Monday, Wednesday, Friday. My commentaries that I write at WashingtonTimes.com, as well as my Bold and Blunt podcast, as well as my Bold and Blunt video versions, which I'm going to be recording one soon with Colonel Alan West. You don't want to miss that one. That one in particular is for Washington Times subscribers only. So if you're not a subscriber to the Washington Times, I would say, if you want to see this great interview that I have with Alan West, it's on video. It's on video. He's in Texas. I'm at the offices in D.C. at the Washington Times headquarters. But if you want to see it and hear all the cool stuff we talk about, and it is cool stuff, you have to subscribe. You have to subscribe to the Washington Times. You can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. And I'm going to quickly mention, because I always forget to do this, and I have a friend who tells me I should always do this, but I always forget. So while it's on my mind, I'm going to do this now. My latest nonfiction book is called God-Given or Bust: Defeating Marxism and Saving America with Biblical Truths. Yes, I tell you how to beat back these Democrats, right? Which is the topic of discussion today, because we're talking about socialists, so that's code for Democrats, right? All right, let's look at what is going on in New York City. Axios writes what they're saying. People discounted Zohran. What a name, by the way, is that? You know, there was just to digress for a bit, there was a guy out in California. I can't remember his name, but it was something akin to Zohran. And he represented the political party out in California that wanted to give robots human rights. I'm not saying they're related, not saying there's any relation at all. I'm just saying it reminds me of that guy. Anyhow, people discounted Zohran, Axios writes, because he was young, Muslim, progressive, unelectable, and a socialist. That is a quote from Minneapolis City Council member Jason Chavez. So the guy wins his primary, right? He wins over the better known name Cuomo. And now you have this big socialist cheer taking place across America. All the socialists are rising up. Workers' Party of the world, unite, or whatever their saying is, right? And they're seeing their end. They're seeing their time has come. They're seeing their opportunity. And now you have, as this organization, the militant.com writes, Minneapolis, SWP, Socialist Workers' Party candidate Kevin Dwyer thinks he has a chance at becoming the next mayor. But he's not the only one, right? You've got another candidate out there in Minneapolis. What is going on? What is going on in this city, right? Omar Fateh, Fateh, he is a Muslim Democratic Socialist. He wants to become the next mayor of Minneapolis as well. So Zoran has unleashed this big hope and change among all the socialists in America, that they too can become the next political leader in a Democrat-controlled city near you. So what's going on here? Why the rise of socialism? Well, I say that socialists come from a culture that is godless. Because if you have, for instance, as we were founded upon in America, a notion of individual rights coming from God, coming from a creator, which we in America, we held those truths to be self-evident, right? That all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights or unalienable rights, whichever side of that argument you fall on, among life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. But the point being, the premise being that rights and liberties come from God. So we had that in America. We still do have that in America. But when we lose sight of that, as we are quickly doing in America, what happens is it opens the door to rights coming from, not God, guess where? Government. And this is where the socialists, so happily march in with their boot-stomping socialist dances. And they tread and they destroy all things individual. Because in socialist mind, you as an individual exist to serve the state, to serve the interests of the state, to further the interests of the state, to further the powers of the state. And since state doesn't really... State is a very generic term. What we're talking about is you as an individual furthering the powers of those who have grabbed a hold of the positions of authority in the state. Somebody's always leading. It's not just this, this floaty state, right, out there guiding. There's somebody within that state system who is leading. And socialists want you to believe that if you just adopt socialism as your guiding compass in life, that everybody's happy, everybody gets the same, everybody has an equal playing field, everybody gets free college, free daycare, free food, free housing, free, totally free. Which, if you know your Bible, right, you know that's completely contrary to what God ordained. Remember the whole Genesis, Adam and Eve thing where they sinned and God booted them out of Eden. And he said that man, as part of his new curse for his sin, would have to work in order to eat, in order to survive. And women, sadly, right, would have greatly increased pain during childbirth. So these are curses that came because of the sin of Adam and Eve. And socialism comes along and says, we don't need no stinking God, right? We got government. And so if you want to have a nation that is rooted on individual freedoms coming from God, coming from a creator, it requires the population, it requires the people of that nation to be believers in God, to know God, to study God's word, to put God's truths in effect, in play, in the day-to-day. whether that day to day be in the family unit or in the politics, in the political structure. And so we're losing that in America. I wrote about this in one of my earlier books, Socialists Don't Sleep, Christians Must Rise or America Will Fall. Well, lo and behold, falling farther. Here we are. We have these open, bragging open socialists who are just card-carrying communists. Come on. This socialism would be tame, what they're advocating, right? Control prices at the grocery store. Yeah, sounds great unless you're the grocer, right? Unless that happens to be your business. Sounds great unless you happen to work for your living. And when you see your money going toward buying all these free groceries for those people who don't want to work for a living or shouldn't even be in this country in the first place. I guess sit down, shut up, stifle, take it. That's socialism for you. But these people that are emerging in the Democrat Party to become so-called progressives or Democrat socialists, look, they're communists, right? They're card-carrying communists. I shouldn't say card-carrying because they're probably not carrying the card. They're carrying the Democrat Party card, right? So they really are communists in disguise. And they sell a great narrative to those who don't want to work for a living, to those who don't belong in this country in the first place because they're not legal, and to those who just seek to rise up through political ranks by dividing and conquering those who don't need government in the first place to provide for themselves and their families. So it's a sad, sorry time in America when we see these open socialists who are actually disguised, not so disguised, communists, come to positions of political power and openly campaign on things that are so contrary to what America stands for, which again is God-given individualism, which again requires people to believe in God, which again requires people to put into practice in their own individual lives godly principles and godly biblical truths, which, going back to the Garden of Eden and the curse, requires you to work for a living. You shouldn't be demanding your government, meaning my government, meaning me as a taxpayer, provide for you and your kid and your family when you could do so yourself. Anyhow, that's my rant. I have on as my guest Judge Phil Ginn. He is the president of the Southern Evangelical Seminary, and he has much more to say about the intersection of faith and freedom in America and where we stand at that fork road. Judge Phil Ginn, I want to thank you so much for being back on Bold and Blunt. So great to have you here.
It's always my pleasure. I really enjoy being with you.
And you, as president of the Southern Evangelical Seminary, you have some interesting thoughts on what's going on in America with faith and freedom. Talk a little bit about your alarm.
Well, Cheryl, I would say to you that I'm so thankful that I live in North Carolina, which was one of the two states originally who refused to sign on to the Constitution until the Bill of Rights was added to it. The very first right that's placed into our Bill of Rights is the freedom of religion, followed closely by the freedom of speech, and those two are really tied together. And when you see at least the thought police of the culture attacking those two things, those two entities to the extent that we're seeing in our nation, I think it's time for us who are believers to be concerned about it. If you look at what's happening in Canada and Europe and particularly UK, there's actually a bill in front of the Parliament in Canada right now to criminalize anyone who makes a statement and belief in a holy text.
Unbelievable. Yes.
And, as they go, so will we go if we're not careful. And so that's why I think it's so important for us to rise up and say, hey, we deserve an equal space in the marketplace. without fear of intimidation.
So under the previous administration, I think a large percentage of Americans would be feeling the exact same fear. But it seems to me that under this present Donald Trump administration, that a lot of Americans are seeing a more optimistic type of outlook when it comes to expression of faith in America. Where do you stand on that scale?
I see certainly with Mr. Trump, I'm not going to hide my emotions in that regard, because I think Mr. Trump is making some great strides toward that, toward the end of allowing freedom of speech and freedom of religion. The problem that we have with that is that even with the new commissions that he's putting, and I understand, I'm hearing through the grapevine that there's an additional one coming with a former congressman who is maybe going to head it up, that I'm excited about, that's really going to focus on what's happening in America. We still have that same kind of pushback from the culture that's going to be there. And what I'm saying to America is that right now we probably have 3 years of respite at a minimum for us to solidify our gains on the beachhead and protecting our religious freedom, because we don't know what's going to come after Mr. Trump, for one thing. Secondly, once this kind of thought process gets entrenched, we see the pushback that's coming with immigration, with the anti-Semitism that's holding court still on our college campuses. Although Mr. Trump is making great strides in fighting that, it's not been eradicated. And certainly the attack on freedom of speech and religion has not been eradicated either. So I'm thankful for the pushback. I am still saying the battle's far from over.
And you sort of point to the deeper problem there, which is that the idea of our God-given individual liberties and right being subjected to whomever's in political office at all just shows how far we've strayed from founding father intent.
Yeah, and you know, Cheryl, I'm not one of these who makes the statement that America is a Christian nation. I don't believe we were founded as a Christian nation. I don't think that we certainly are not a Christian nation now, if you just look at the statistics. But what happened was Christianity has always been and continues to be, should be, the conscience of our nation. And our whole scenario of government is based on the morality that is found across faiths. With that being the case, when we find a lack of morality, particularly in politics and in our government, then who's to protect us from the deluge of the culture that's coming in that wants us to be not only put behind the door, but eradicated from the marketplace?
Do you see the growing embrace, largely from the Democrat Party, of open socialists and even communists serving in political offices? Just look at New York City, right? Who's running for mayor there? Do you see that as indicative of America's moral decline?
Oh, absolutely. And ironically, what you're seeing is that the one religion, and I don't mean to pick on people, but the one religion that is dominating when it comes to a government of any sort is Islam. And you look at the theocracies that exist now across the world, and they're all Islamic by nature. And I think while Christianity can tolerate Islam in regard to governance, I'm not sure that Islam can tolerate Christianity. In addition to that, Cheryl, you have all the issues with, and I can't keep up with all the alphabet anymore, but the LGBTQ whatever, you're seeing that pushback, because if you say that that is morally wrong, then they have to quell that process and that thought from getting into the marketplace, because that is certainly an attack on what they perceive to be the core of their beliefs. And so that's and abortion's another thing. If you say you're against abortion, you gotta be quieted, and so they don't want our faith to come into the marketplace, I think they'd be satisfied if we practiced our faith solely within the confines of our stained glass windows, but that's not what churches were made for.
Do you think Islam is compatible with the Constitution?
No.
Yeah, I don't either.
I'm sorry to be so blunt, but, I'm 72 years old now, Cheryl, and it's time for us to go ahead and just say the truth. It's not. The way that Islam is formatted, and I've studied the Quran and the Hadiths that go with it, and you either convert or you die, one or the other. And that's the way Islam is spread. And so that's certainly counterproductive to what we as Americans know and adhere to in terms of personal freedom. I certainly am not for going out and hanging Hindus or hanging gays or hanging anybody. I mean, that's totally counterproductive to what the Bible teaches. But that's not what Islam is about. Islam is about either converting to their morals and their code and their faith, or face the consequences. And they come in, Cheryl, none of this comes as a frontal attack. Socialism and communism does not attack you at the front. They tried the economic side in America, and that just didn't work because our economy is much stronger than most of the nations where they try to take over. So now they're coming at us from three different angles, really. They're all tied together. One is race. And it's interesting to see that when all these No Kings protests occurred all across the nation, there were white people in them.
Yes.
I'm just amazed by that. And they were, and not only that, but a lot of them were older white people, particularly older white females. Then the second thing they attack us in regard to is Palestine and the anti-Semitic wave of our nation and Christianity's support of Israel. So that's another point there. And then they come at us with the sexual, if you want to call it revolution or whatever you might want to say. It's been going on for a long time. And so you just, it's now, the only thing I would say about the sexual revolution is it may have gone a step too far with transgenderism, and I see some move back even amongst some of the homosexual community in regard to transgenderism. And that may be a bridge too far for them.
Yeah, honestly, let's hope, right? I mean, let's hope there is some sort of boundary, even with the far left in this country. But what you described, that's really your Marxist ideologies at play, right? Divide and conquer, divide the population into little segments that you can then war against each other, right? That's what's going on.
Yeah, it's pitting one group against another, and they cannot gain control legitimately, so they gain control through chaos. And you look at California, you look at all the protests around that are going on. It is an effort to create chaos. And in fact, when we opened the borders under the former President Biden's administration, that was an effort to create chaos, and certainly was successful in that regard. And now it's very, very difficult. Once these people get in, it's very, very difficult to identify where they are and who they are. And certainly in the cost of human trafficking and all that sort of thing, it comes into play in a very frightful way. And that's where the freedom of religion is so important, because we need to be able to speak out of that. And I just think it's past time for us, true Christ followers, to rise up all across America and proclaim that enough of this is enough. We have to stand firm, and certainly in a civil way, but yet an unyielding way, Cheryl, to say that we're not going to give our precious children over to this pernicious indoctrination of the left.
Couldn't agree more. I think that really a large reason or a significant part of the reason why America is at war with itself in many respects is because Christians, those who are supposed to know better, have been too silent in recent years. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. There's a twofold thing that has actually occurred. Um, and the first one is, in the face of this onslaught, if you will, Christians have almost uh, self-censored themselves. They're afraid to speak up.
Yes.
And for fear of being attacked themselves, um, or maybe even hurt themselves. I mean, it's kind of like driving a Tesla automobile now. You just don't know whether you're supposed to or not. And so, that's one thing that we have to realize. And the other thing is a secular intolerance. How in the world can you only be tolerant of that with which you agree? And as we face this, I've said before that Christians tend to meld into the culture and disappear like vaporized ghosts. And we forget, Cheryl, that it was with the torched bodies of early Christians that the Roman roads were lighted. And I just don't think that we as Christians ought to be so readily willing to give up that for which so many have fallen and died without so much as even a whimper.
Yeah, it's out of some sort of, I don't know, misguided biblical principles that they think, tolerating is what Jesus wants you to do, and so it becomes tolerating evil. And I think Barack Obama, you can go back in time and see how he really,
absolutely.
he really perfected the art of divide and conquer, and it's really sped up in recent years. So here's my last question for you, Judge Ginn. When you look forward in America, I think a lot of people, even in the Christian community, thought Donald Trump's in office now, things are going to calm down. But you see, for one example, Tom Homan, as he takes a determined stand against the Democrats opening borders and continuing to embrace illegals and fights back, you don't see the Democrats standing down. You don't see the left going away. So looking forward, is our fight going to subside in any sense, or is it going to get worse?
It's going to intensify. It will intensify. And I hate to. I'm going to say this too. Here is something that I'm encouraged about, and I just want to tell you and your listeners that I believe that there is a revival coming in America. I see anecdotal evidences of what I call pre-shock tremors to an eventual earthquake of a revival. And, well, that may be a misnomer. It will have to be a resurrection of true faith, not a revival of true faith. But at any rate, I think that's the only thing that is going to make any difference in our nation. But short of that, we're on the losing side in America, ultimately. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer in that regard, but this is a spiritual warfare. It's not a political warfare, Cheryl. I just think that as we face these uncertain days, I think we need to be found standing in the battle in the full armor of God and proclaiming a God who loved the world so much that he gave his only son to die for us. And as we stand in the power of Christ's resurrection, I don't think there's any safer place to be, no matter what arrows may be directed in our midst. And I don't think that Jesus, when he was here, ever made the promise that we would have easy days. In fact, he says, in this world, you will have trouble. But there's no safer place to be than in the will of God. And there's no safer place in America than to be proclaiming the necessity of the freedom of religion and freedom of speech that's encased in the First Amendment to our Constitution.
Yep. That's the real war. As you point out, it is a spiritual battle of principalities. So politics are important to get involved in, but they're
Absolutely.
they're not the ultimate battle here. So I want to thank you so much, Judge Phil Ginn, for your time, for a very fascinating conversation, as always. Thank you.
Cheryl, I look forward to the next time. Just let me know.
All right. And that's another Bold and Blunt. Remember, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and wherever podcasts are available. You know what else you can get wherever books are available? My latest, God-Given or Bust: Defeating Marxism and Saving America with Biblical Truths. If you like this conversation with Judge Phil Ginn, then you'll love some of the solutions that I outline in God-Given or Bust to bring America back to a time where rights came from God and government was only there to serve and protect and preserve those God-given rights. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.